Okay, our next speaker is Matthias Herborg. Matthias is the Aquatic Invasive Species Coordinator with the BC Ministry of the Environment, Conservation Science Section. He's mainly responsible for all aquatic animals and helps out with plants in freshwater and estuarine environments in all of British Columbia.
So thank you very much for the opportunity to give this talk. I also realize it's late in the day, so I'm going to be as quick as possible. And I kind of want to give you guys a bit more of an operational overview. What are the main big projects or things going on in my world? And what are the opportunities, challenges, etc., etc. So without further ado, just a very quick overview about the BC Invasive Species Program, kind of who's doing what. BC, like I think probably a lot of the other provinces, the Invasive Terrestrial Plant Program is something which has been established a long time ago, is well funded. In BC we have, I think, about 100 years. It's administered through with about $3 million a year through the ministry with the longest name, Ministry of Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operation. And also the Ministry of Transport does a lot of that work. Then we have the invasive aquatic plant component, which is something that came online more recently. This is also taken over by Flunrono. We have the invasive aquatic animal component, which is dealt by my ministry. I'm the Ministry of Environment. That program has been starting kind of for around 5 years, and I don't have exactly a lot of funding, but we also just recently decided to expand into invasive terrestrial animals, meaning also vertebrates. I mean, the forestry pests and the insects are obviously dealt with elsewhere, and this is an even newer program. And just to give you a quick overview, we do every year a funding review, what money goes where. These are thousands of dollars, and you can see certainly on the left which are the main players. The big Natural Resource Ministry has the most funds, and Ministry of Transport. And I guess more noteworthy, if you look on the pie chart on the left, I know pie charts aren't very scientific, but hey. You see the absolute majority of the money is pretty much going into plants, and these are the operational funds only, meaning not the also manpower going into it. So, like many provinces, a lot of stuff going on with plants, not so much with non-plants. Also, who are we working with, and who are our key partners in delivering that program? One big thing we have our Inter-Ministry Invasive Species Working Group, where all those ministries you saw on the pie charts, we're sitting around together, and this is actually an operational level meeting and groups, so I think we are pretty good at sharing what's going on, sharing funds, finding areas we can collaborate and just make the few dollars go further. Another important thing we have in BC, we have a provincial, and the whole province is covered by individual invasive plant or species group, which deliver a lot of the invasive plant program actually from the province, but their end goes actually with government dollars and government involvement. And they're increasingly expanding towards species, so they're pretty strong partners on a local level, with local knowledge, with local stakeholders, and local government involved, but also provincial government, which can help us delivering things. I should say the plant program certainly is ahead of us again. I mean, they have the watch list, they do EDRR and containment, and they have clear strategies which species they do what with, so they're really ahead on towards the aquatic side. And then the other thing, we have the Invasive Species Council of BC, which is kind of acts on a province-wide level, and they've been very successful at attracting non-AIS specific funding to do AIS work, aquatic invasive species work, or other invasive species work. And for example, for the last years, they've delivered a pretty significant clean, drain and dry program across BC on boat ramps, having 15 staff for the whole summer, doing a ton of outreach and boater surveys, etc., etc. So just to give you an idea who's kind of doing what here. Also a lot of federal agencies I'm working with. You heard pretty much from all of them here today, which was great, I think. And I just want to highlight at what level I'm working together with, or we're working together with DFO. Obviously, we have the shared jurisdiction in BC over freshwater because they have managed the anadromous fish in marine or freshwater. And we have all the other fish and freshwater environment as well. But we also work together on the Introduction and Transfer Committee, on aquaculture, and also the permitting of eradication, rapid responses in the aquatic environment. We have to heavily work together with them. Then Health Canada, Pest Management Regulator Authority, again for rapid response pesticide applications, we talked to them. Canadian Food Inspection Agency, we've heard about the importation of aquatic animals regulation, introduction, transfer, and also fish disease is something we're working with them. And the Canadian Border Service agencies, also very important for us, especially silver quagga mussel boat. You saw the case mentioned earlier on where the Border Service guy this year, the first silver quagga mussel boat, one of the Border Service agency staff saw it, called us, and could deal with it. So just talk about a couple of the key issues we have in BC. One is the bucket brigade, the intentional introduction of yellow perch, also smallmouth bass, but I want to focus on yellow perch. In particular, this population in the red circle I want to highlight. The watersheds are on this graph, and if I figure out that. But basically, the noteworthy thing is all the yellow perch in this area here is in the Columbia River basin, Columbia drainage, but this year is actually Fraser. So this was the first major introduction of yellow perch into the Fraser. What you see up here, that's actually the piece, and this is native. So zooming in, those perch were introduced to a bunch of small lakes, all very close to out into the Shuswap Lake in the Thompson region, which had some of the most significant sockeye runs. So the decision was made to eradicate it using rotenone. It was a number of lakes done over a 5-year program altogether, and I really just want to show you this slide to show you what it looked like when you do a rotenone treatment. And I had the glorious job of being a guy at the front for a day. It's awesome. And it just also show you, this looks awful. You're doing this on a lake, and after you finish, all the fish are dead. However, the regional staff pulled it off. The eradication happened. As far as we know, they were successful, and they were able to convince the public that it was a good thing to do, and there was no opposition, there was full buy-in, so it's a really great success as far as what can be done, even if initially everybody thought we can't do this, it's not going to happen. So that's why I wanted to talk about this particular case, and overall, because we also have the potential introduction of smallmouth bass, largemouth bass, walleye, and northern pike, unfortunately, as well. And so we have policy in place which allows us in certain cases, we can say, okay, we need to eradicate this population, otherwise we change the fishing regulations, try to achieve a change. And we've done the eradication programs. The challenges is that within the individual regions within BC, they're relatively independent, so they can decide what kind of fishing regulations they want or not. And in some areas, unfortunately, perch and bass are the main game fish for the public, so they are not that keen to crack down regulation-wise on this species. Some areas there's also popularity of bass fishing. We have several bass fishing clubs in BC. So that's one issue to a continuous coordinated approach to management in BC. It's also after lunch for me, sorry guys. And then, another challenge I didn't show it on the map, but in the upper Fraser we have a smallmouth bass population which has been introduced a couple of years ago, and the estimate right now is $9.4 million for the eradication, which is money nobody has, but if we don't deal with it, it's going to start spreading through the Fraser, and downstream is pretty easy for fish, so that's really bad, but we don't know what to do there right now. On the science things in here, I had my master's student looking at the impact of smallmouth bass in BC, which was really good data we got out of it, which we can use very effectively to educate our stakeholders and anglers. Smallmouth bass are not good. If you have smallmouth bass, your rainbow trout will suffer. Very good data, very useful was CAISN 1.3. We have the risk assessment I did when I was working for Nick. They are very useful there. And also a future master in CAISN is going to look at prediction of introductions in BC, which again will really help us with the management. Spartina, another big project we're involved with right now, Spartina eradication, and this picture, it's not this guy is so small, but the plant is so tall. It's a cordgrass, it's an intertidal cordgrass, it's along the whole west coast of North America. BC, southern BC is the most southern point there, so for your orientation, this here is the US-Canadian border, this is the Vancouver area, this is the airport, is right here? Yeah. And this is on the east coast of Vancouver Island. We have a couple of populations there, different species, and the really important thing is species were discovered in 2004. Manual eradication was attempted for almost 10 years, but the last 2 years the number of clones increased almost exponentially. So we took the steps to move forward to apply the approach south of the border, which has been used south of the border. We moved to herbicides, which again, everybody said in the beginning, we heard several times you can't do herbicides intertidally, and we just were persistent, kept pushing on. We had a lot of good data from south of the border, so we could closely follow their program. Spartina management in BC is funny because unlike in the States, it's led by the BC Spartina Working Group, which is a group of, it is provincial government on it, regional, local government, municipalities, we have Anglos on it, all sorts of people, which it's led by Ducks Unlimited, who do a great job in leading it, but they were really instrumental, and I guess this membership was also instrumental that we could get eventually this herbicide approval there. It's a huge process to get this herbicide approval in, because I mean the Premier, Gordon Campbell, former Premier, did sign agreement with our other jurisdiction and we will eradicate Spartina by 2018, but there was no funding associated with it, so we've been scrambling ever since. DFO is not really involved, unfortunately, which I would love. It would contribute a little more, but it's not so much. There has, but also from the provincial side, there has been no constant stream of funding, so it's very haphazard how we do it. The biggest challenge also was, like I mentioned, emergency registration of pesticide. It was a 3-year process to get this emergency permit going, which from a rapid response perspective is kind of working for a plant maybe, but for anything else we realize this is not that effective. And as far as science that played into that component, there was really research into impacts of Spartina was very beneficial there, and we also did drift cart study. There has been good work done south of the border into that, and we did our own little experiments in BC. And then we had a lot of pesticide impact data from the Environmental Protection Agency in the US. And yeah, we were able to do the first treatment last year, and we're going to continue this for a few years. And just to, as a young parent, your children are your best timeline, and for me, it's in June 2010 we started the application process when my little Dylan was a little squirt, and that's when we got the permit. So it really shows you, is this really an emergency response? You have to ask yourself, and can we improve the process? You decide the answer. The other thing I'm involved with is the introduction transfers, and this is not really, it's not a project, it's a committee, but it's, I think, a relatively important committee because this is the one that decides what species can come in for aquaculture and stocking, and what's their fate, can they come into BC, where they can be released, etc., etc. It's a pretty important component, and it's assessed, each species or applications assessed based on its ecological, genetic, or disease risk. So around the table is the provincial government, me and one of my colleagues, and several colleagues from DFO, mainly the fish disease experts. And I think we're doing a pretty good job at looking what's coming in for aquaculture and stocking. But the big problem is the Introduction Transfer Committee does not cover live food trade. Anything that comes across the borders goes straight to the live food markets we never see. We also don't deal with aquarium and pet trade, so again, anything that comes in. So this is a real problem. I wouldn't say our enforcement ability around what we put in as conditions or what we require around our introduction and transfer permits is particularly strong. There's a bit of a gap here. The coordination with the Canadian Food Inspection Agency is also somewhat struggling, which is also to do just manpower on particularly the CFIA side, where one person is in charge of aquatic animals in, I think, 4 Western provinces or 3 Western provinces. And we have different mandates. CFIA does animal health. We look at, well, I try to look at aquatic invasive species, which is not, there's an overlap, like you said, Nick, but it's not the same. As far as what science we use, I mean, we use obviously the risk assessment that are out there. Research, I mean, it's basically we get a request for some random species and we scramble trying to figure out. So thermotolerance, invasion history, impacts is important, fish base is a source, and it's embarrassing to admit, but sometimes you're almost stuck with just using Wikipedia because for some of these weird species there's not a lot out there. And it's this challenge if you're at an operational level, something comes in, you have to make a decision. You can't make a 2-year study, so you have to decide based on the best available information. But I think the screening level risk assessment will hopefully help us as well. I wanted to look into that closely. So moving onwards now, just very quickly, BC has controlled alien species regulations, so we banned in 2012, largely based out of this whole snakehead event you might remember in the summer of 2012. I was in the national news chasing the snakehead. might have forgotten already, but that's okay. But it really created the political will to ban a bunch of aquatic species in BC, and it's again, this is opportunistic, opportunity arises, and then you have to try to, okay, let's not just ban snakehead, you know, this is bigger than snakehead, and okay, you can ban 10 species, okay, well, let's make 10 families, so now we're about ban actually effectively 150 species in BC, but you know, that's what you do. So we obviously most of them on the usual candidate was based on kind of invasion history, what we know was in the trade, what we had already in BC. So this is what we banned. The upper ones are all banned alive in BC, so we don't want them in the live food trade and the aquarium trade. And this applies to transport, possession, breeding, release. We can't do importation because it's federal. And for the super quagga mussels, we banned them alive or dead, which is around issues distinguishing live and dead mussels in a way that stands up in front of court, which you can't really do. So based on that now, the big challenge is implementation, and there's a lot of things you just have to train your enforcement officers that they know what they're looking at, what the rules are. I've done pretty much most of them in BC, the Canadian Border Service Agency right now I'm talking with, and thanks to Helen and her colleagues, it looks like I'm able to train them as well. And some of them clearly have trained themselves because they know who to call, which is great. The challenge there is that right now for the Border Service Agency to be fully effective, we need federal legislation to be in place, which we're waiting for right now. And the implementation will be probably largely a provincial responsibility, which is a challenge because we don't have a lot of resources either. And the other challenge is just that, like in BC, we have a regional DFO prohibited species list. We have the CFIA animal health list. We have the BC controlled alien species regulation, and we will have the federal aquatic invasive species regulation list as well. That's 4 lists of prohibited species that the poor proponent who wants to import fish or aquatic animals has to figure out. And at the moment, we are not quite set up yet that one agency necessarily informs the other. So we have to get better and figure it out better. And right now, yeah, the problem is resources. And the big one is, as far as science concerned, again, the risk assessment impact work was really crucial in informing us. Now I want to focus a little bit more on the Siouan quagga mussel, which is one of my main tasks right now. We do have, for all of you marine folks who don't quite know what the Columbia River Basin looks like, this is a big one in the west. Columbia River Basin, all the dots are hydropower. It's the last major basin in the US which doesn't have Siouan quagga mussels in it. 5 minutes? Okay, really quick. So there's this big agreement, including BC, to keep Siouan quagga mussels out of there. A lot of the US jurisdictions do major work as far as boat inspections are concerned. This is a map of Idaho with their, I think it's 16 mandatory boat inspection stations. At any point you enter that state, you have to pull into a boat inspection station. These inspection stations are open 4, 5, 6 months a year. Over the last 5 years, they've inspected 200,000 boats. So these guys take it seriously. And you see from the pie chart on the left again, I'm sorry, it's a pie chart. It's, you see 11% of the boats just going through Idaho were destined for British Columbia. So they have covered our backside, I'm on video, multiple times over the last 2 years, and they still do. If they see a boat going to BC, they give me a call. But I mean, it costs $1.5 million a year, but on the scale of things, 1.5 million years versus impacts. This is really such a big deal. And which brings me to the thing, I mean, in the western provinces right now in BC, we are in Siouan mussel rapid response mode, because since November, as this USGS map shows, we have Siouan mussels in Lake Winnipeg confirmed. And you know it's bad if a US Geological Survey actually includes Canadian data. That's serious. They don't do that ever. Sorry, I'm looking at colleagues here. I apologize. But it's true. Right now, there's really the provincial government is trying to do the potash eradication, which is probably going to happen in the next few weeks. It's in 5 marinas on the lake. The federal contribution is limited to science and permitting. There hasn't been any monitoring in the past in Manitoba and Saskatchewan, so we don't know what these 2 provinces have or have not. However, the only good news, Alberta is conducting the 2nd year of roadside inspections this year. They have funding for that, but they have no legislation. BC has legislation, but we don't have support for the roadside inspections yet. But at the same time, we also did a study. We know Siouan quagga mussels, and this is a very conservative estimate, would cost BC around $28 million per year per year. Yeah, not good. So what we're doing there, I mentioned we are working together with the Columbia River Basin, our neighboring jurisdictions. We have a good network of notification of infested boats. We share our monitoring data. We do joint rapid response exercises using the incident command system, which is pretty awesome. We do our outreach. But really the big challenge is we have no DFO support in the western provinces around Seaboard, Quagga, Mussels, and AIS in general. So it's all provinces, and we are not that well resourced either, so that's a big challenge. Registration of molluscicides is a huge challenge. At rapid response right now, it would be difficult to get the molluscicides in the water. I admire what they do like Winnipeg. And as far as science, I mean, a lot of science went in the States in the decontamination sampling, etc., etc. So I'm just thinking about the paper by Logidal as far as pathways where aquatic organisms are found in Canada or going into BC, and I just picked the ones with the boxes are with aquatic organisms. Red means there's currently no regulation for it. Orange, at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 species of the 1,000 the pathway are regulated, and green ones are the ones we got kind of covered. And there's clearly still work to do. We have a lot to do. We are lucky with live bait is banned in BC. That's a good thing in the freshwater. Gaps and challenges, I mentioned before, I don't think aquatic invasive species quite had made it a core component of the different programs in the various government agency. Funding is a challenge, manpower is a challenge. Regulation leaves still a lot of pathways unmanaged, and there are different management approaches and objectives, which is natural, but we have to figure those out. And then communications, being in government, it's not always easy to talk to the public, in particular to the media. We know that. And also science and management. Being in science, you have to realize that most operational staff doesn't read paper, doesn't go to conference. If you want them to know what you're doing, you have to talk to them or get it to them across. We see we don't have any strong AIS research going on really. I mean, in the academic field, obviously, in DFO they're doing good marine stuff, but freshwater is very thin. There's no good funding sources right now, and but a lot of these management questions could be answered with very basic science, and I just made a long watch list, I'm not going to go into it. But a lot of them are covered by part of CAISN, which is very encouraging. And so this is 2 questions. Thank you.
Question? Everybody wants to have coffee. Okay, thank you, Matthias.